Clean. I'm your host, and today I'm lucky enough to have Daniel Cross, the AFL reconditioning coach at the North Melbourne Football Club, on as our guest. Welcome, Crossy. Thanks for jumping on, mate. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Jack. As I've mentioned to you before, I enjoy a lot of your work on here, so pleasure to be part of it.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure is all mine, and no doubt most listeners will be well aware of your background, both the footballers tuning in from your AFL days and of course S&Cs in the industry from a high performance point of view. But for those that aren't aware of your background, mate, I guess kick us off with playing days. Where did you start playing your footy, and then the transition to high performance sport? Why did you choose the strength and conditioning side over? No doubt there was opportunities in the tactical sort of coaching side of things.
Yeah, so I grew up in Albury, so a great little town for kids who love their sport. So grew up in a great community, footy, basketball, cricket, athletics. So I love growing up there, and I moved down to Melbourne for footy when I was 17. Completed year 12. Down here in Melbourne. And then once I'd finished year 12, I went to uni at ACU, did my degree part-time. Did the exercise science degree, and took me 8 years to do, but it was certainly well worth doing once I'd finished playing football. So did that side by side for a while, and I met my wife during that time as well, I guess. We've been blessed with two beautiful children as well, Tyler and Charlie. And we sort of brought our family up in a good environment. Sport's a big part of our family now as well, like it was when I was a kid. And very busy with the kids after work and so forth. Once I finished playing, played at the Bulldogs for 13 years, from 2000 to 2013, and then at the end of that time, I moved across to Melbourne and played there for another 2 years, which was great. And part of that transition across to Melbourne was there. The guys making the decisions on whether I'd be coming across or not was what I wanted to do after football. And I'd always had a huge passion for the high performance area. So whether I'd played 1, 2, or 3 years, we weren't sure at the time. Depended how I went. After my second year, they decided that they wanted to keep playing a lot of the boys there, and a lot of those guys that played in the 2021 premiership. So I moved into the high performance area, which I was very grateful for. And as I said, I always had a keen passion for it. There was some great people that I worked with there that I learned a massive amount from early days. And I think there was opportunities to go to other clubs and be involved as a coach and so forth. And I guess a lot of past players go down the coaching route, or they jump into the media or so forth. So my path's a little bit unique in that way. It's, as I said, it's always been my passion. And I've been doing that since 2016, where I worked at Melbourne for 5 years, and unfortunately, once COVID hit, I lost my job during that time. But the last 3 years, I've been at North Melbourne working in their S&C team and loving my time there.
That's it. That's great, mate. And you mentioned strong influences that help sort of shape your philosophy to date. Obviously, been working into elite programs and then playing over a long period of time as well at the Doggies. Who were some of those strong influences, whether it be from a strength and conditioning point of view, from an athlete's perspective, when they were managing you, as well as for the coaches sort of had on as well to help shape your philosophy?
Yep. Yeah. As I said, I haven't been involved in the AFL industry for 23, 24 years, and always having a keen interest in the area. I've been extremely fortunate to be involved with some of the best minds in the business. Probably the first one that comes to mind is Justin Cordy. So early 2000s, I think he took over in 2005 as our high performance manager. He really opened my eyes up to the science of sport and the planning that goes into a program with all that information, all that data. So yeah, he was someone who I picked his brain a lot. Bill Davern had a huge influence on me. He came from a triathlon background. I don't think he'd had much to do with ball sports or anything, but he was amazing. He was with us, during our period where we played in a few preliminary finals, and he really showed me what it was like to really take charge of a program and drive the highest of standards and not accepting anything less. He was a really hard taskmaster, but I absolutely love that, and still stay in touch with Bill to this day. From a coaching point of view, David Misson, who he's been in the industry for such a long time. Worked at Sydney in there when they won the premiership in 2005. He worked there for about a dozen years. Worked at St Kilda when they were right up the pointy end, and then he was my first high performance manager at Melbourne. So he really showed me what it was like to manage different personalities within a high performance team and the team's players as well. And he was just a great people person. Really awesome to work under. And then currently, probably in the role that I have at the moment in the reconditioning space, Alex Sikajan is probably, he's definitely the biggest influence that has been on my coaching career. I worked under Alex for my first 2 years at the Melbourne Footy Club, and he showed me firsthand how to piece together programs from start to finish. And to this day, I continue to pick his brain. He's in charge at St Kilda now, and he's just a wealth of knowledge in the high performance space. And he's a great mentor to have, and he's a good friend as well. So yeah, they're probably a few that stick out for me.
Yeah, it's a great list of bright minds, like you said, mate. And what about from both playing as well as coaching perspective, some highlights that you're proud of? You're proud to experience over your career that sort of spring front of mind.
During my playing days, I guess, playing in finals is, it's what we're all there for. So, I remember so clearly in my mind, my first final that I played against were an elimination final against Collingwood. We're the rank underdogs. No one thought we'd win. We finished 8th and they finished 5th. And yeah, it was a beautiful Sunday afternoon at the MCG, and playing in front of 80 odd thousand was a huge thrill for us. And we had a pretty young group back then, and we came away with a 6-7 goal win, and yeah, that was just an amazing feeling. And then in the years after that, 2008, 9 and 10, unfortunately we weren't able to get to the ultimate and win a grand final. But I still feel it was a really successful period for for the playing group that we had, and I love my teammates and my time during that period. So yeah, that was a great experience, to go deep into finals and play in big finals, for consecutive weeks. Another highlight, the playing days, was I was lucky enough to play for Australia in the international rules, and unfortunately they don't do that much anymore. Hopefully it rekindles and starts up again, but had the opportunity to go over to Ireland and play with some of the best players in our game, and against the best players from Ireland, and we came away with a couple of close wins in that series. And yeah, that was an experience that I'll forever cherish as well. Something that I'll never forget. And then probably from a coaching point of view, over a 7 to 8 year period of being in this role. There's been so many proud moments, and you'd be the same. Guys coming back from serious injuries. There's nothing better than seeing them come back and perform at a high level straight away. Doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's really pleasing. But the one that probably sticks out to me, which was quite an emotional and unique one for everyone involved, and I hope I never, hope I'm never involved in it again, is when we had Ben Cunnington coming back from testicular cancer in 2002. I'd essentially only just arrived at the club, and I played against Cunners a lot, but I didn't really know him that well. So after only a couple of months of getting to know him properly, all of a sudden I was heavily involved in his cancer treatment and eventual return to play. And there was just so much involved with his rehab in regards to specialists and treatment, blood tests, having to check them very often, and football was the last thing on everyone's minds for a long period of time. So when essentially after 9-10 month process, to see him return to the AFL stage against Adelaide over there, back doing what he absolutely loved with his family around him, was a really proud moment for me and all of our team involved. So yeah, that's probably one from a coaching point of view that really sticks out.
Yeah, I remember watching that game. That was just even watching from the telly, you could tell what an emotional experience for everyone involved in his return to play, what it would have been. And I imagine no experience I'm sure experiences would have helped, support him and help his program return to play leading up to that point. But it would have been quite a unique experience. Who did you sort of lean on? You mentioned mentors before, but yeah, how did you sort of go about that return to play? Like, was there set markers like a traditional rehab, or was there was a little bit of time based and almost on how he was presenting on a daily basis? Talk us through the process.
Yeah, a lot of that. Early days, it was basically just getting him doing the bare minimum, and being able to pull up well. Like, there was a long period of time where his specialists at Peter Mac, and we had I can't remember the lady's name, but she was a specialist in the cancer field, and she'd come into the club quite often early days and just check in on Ben. And there's sort of no previous experience that anyone at the club at the time, no one had experienced this before, so we were leaning on those specialists who were coming in to see us as to what we could do and what they thought that he could handle at that time. And it was just a slow process, but he was more than happy just to be able to do the very basics. I remember there was a period of time of, I don't know, it seemed like, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks where we didn't see him for a while. And I remember he'd come back and we were out on the field, and I could see someone sitting on the bench talking to a heap of people, and didn't know who it was. And I remember walking over closer and just realizing it was Cunners, and I just couldn't believe how different he looked from the treatment that he'd had to go through. You get quite emotional, like thinking about it, talking about it. Just what he'd had to go through. He just had, I think, him and his wife, they'd just had their 3rd child as well. So it was a really eye-opening experience for me, and it was eye-opening experience for the playing group as well. As just like things can get taken away from you so quickly, in life in general as well. So not taking things for granted. And whenever Cunners was around, there was always that pep in the step for everyone else around him, because he was battling so hard. And everyone wanted to do it for him, in a sense. So yeah, in terms of his programming, as I said, early days, we were leaning on a lot of the specialists as to what we could do. But once he was sort of through, the early phase, and we'd been given the all clear that he was tracking well, then we went through a reasonably normal reconditioning program, the reloading phase, and all the things that he's required to do out in the field. We built him back, but we just had to take a little bit more time than we normally would. He he was getting a little bit older as well, so he'd started to get a few calf issues and things like that as well. So we had to be mindful of those. And I think about 3/4 of the way through, he did have a small soleus strain, which was frustrating because it sort of pushed his return to play date back. Everyone was really excited about seeing him come back, and those things just throw a spanner in the works. But as I said, to see him come back when he did, was really great for him and for all of us at the club.
Yeah, fantastic. It's from all reports you hear, he's an incredibly hard worker, and his work is one of his strengths. So I imagine he would have been pushing the boundaries and challenging the return to play timeframes.
Not a lot of fuss about Cunners. He's the old country lad, so he didn't like all the fuss, but he certainly needed it.
Yeah. And what about going back to sort of your career, mate? Tips for athletes transitioning into high performance sport? I guess looking back to your transition, is it an easy transition because you've been in that environment for so long? Or are there some challenges there that perhaps athletes need to be aware of? And if you had your time again, you wish you got some advice. Talk us through that transition.
I think sorry, cut that. You cut that bit. I didn't quite grab that. You cut out there at the end. Sorry, Jack.
Oh, did I? Yeah. Can you hear me right now?
Yep, gotcha.
Yeah, transition for athletes transitioning to high performance sport. If look back at that phase, is there some advice you wish if you could tell your younger self something to help that transition? What would that be, I guess, for current athletes listening that are looking at completing their degree and doing the same thing you did, transitioning to high performance sport?
Yep.
What would be some tips you wish you heard?
Yep. Yeah, I think certainly working in the rehab space, the one thing you learn very quickly is that there's absolutely no shortcuts that you can take, and there should never be a cookie cutter approach taken when formulating a successful rehab program. No injury or athlete's characteristics are the same. So, all athletes have different personalities, lifestyle factors, post-injury goals, degrees of competitiveness, and all those things have to come into consideration and thought through with your team and the athlete themselves. So that's probably one piece of advice. Just be well prepared, and the other piece of advice I'd probably give myself coming into it, carries on from that a bit, is always have plan A, B, and sometimes C going into your day's planning. As you know, Jack, you could have formulated the best session for an athlete amongst 5 or 6 others that you might have on your books at any one time. But if 1 or 2 of them come into training or pulled up sore, or one or 2 of them are at home because they're sick, it could throw your conditioning or some of the footy drills that you had planned out due to numbers changing. So I think it's always important to have a backup plan and be flexible. And I also think it's really important not to show the athletes that you're flustered or disorganized by those changes. I think it's really important for the athletes to see that you're in charge. Stay calm. And adjust on the run. I think they're things that I've learned. Over my time. You put a lot of, as you put a lot of thought and work into what's coming up next straight away, and things can just change in an instant, even on the morning of training. So it's just always being flexible and leaning on those people around you for some of the changes that need to happen on those days.
Fantastic advice, mate, or for anyone really looking to work into high performance sport. I think couldn't agree more that the individual variation of understanding everyone's different and treating the person in front of you is so important. Yeah. Then having that plan A, B, and C, not being rigid on plan A, that can certainly get you into trouble. And being really fluid and adaptable and collaborative, leaning on people around you, which in a fast-paced industry where everyone's running on the same schedule can be challenging. But ultimately taking a pause and making sure you're making a collective decision during those moments. Yep. Well, mate, we'll move into, it's almost a good segue for AFL reconditioning. I guess walk us through, for those unaware of what an AFL reconditioning coach does. What's a typical day, I guess, for you? Where probably not off-season phase, but when we start back at pre-season, going into a main training day, how do you like to prepare for it the day before? And talk us through, I guess, the key areas of the day for you.
Yeah, so I'm as you would be. We're part of a big team. We've got 3 full-time physios. We've got 3 doctors. We've got our head of strength, head of sports science, our high performance manager, dietitians, head of the VFL program. And then so I'm the reconditioning coach, and I work closely. We have a rehab physio whose name's Liam Phillips, who's unbelievable practitioner. This is his first year across from St Kilda, and he was great to work with this year. Liam and I work side by side throughout the year, and I guess once a player goes down with an injury, probably the first stage is there's a lot of information gathering from the physios and doctors, and scans, x-rays, external consultants, opinions on the injury, and then once that diagnosis has been made and we know exactly what we're dealing with, we're then trying to get the athlete back to baseline with their symptoms and clinical signs as fast as possible. And during that stage, we'll sit down with the athlete and explain to them, what's happened and, why it possibly happened and what our plan of attack is going to be moving forward. And I guess early stage, a lot of the work, in that recovery stage, a lot of the work is done by Liam. And then, once the guys start progressing through into sort of the reloading and reconditioning phase, they start to come under my watch a lot more. My day-to-day job, our first port of call on main training days is, we'll set up and plan, usually the day before, or a lot of the time, 2-3 days before, as I said before, planning ahead as to what's coming up for each individual player. We'll have our team meeting in the morning, and Liam and I will run through what our players have got on for the day, and he'll usually take the guys that are in the gym and either cross training, and then I'll take the guys that are outside reconditioning out on the field. We'll have our sessions. I try to mingle them in together as much as possible. But as I said before, a lot of the time, you don't want to take that approach where you're just doing the same for him because he's doing that. You want to try and make it specific to their position and their needs and where they're up to with their rehab. So a lot of planning goes into that, and then we'll carry out the session. Hopefully all goes smoothly. We've got our live GPS out in the field, so that helps a lot. Being able to monitor the guys out in the field. Session would be done, and then guys might come in for top up conditioning if they've had a reasonably low load out on the field. And then they might jump in with Liam for some of their rehab exercises straight off the track as well. So he'll sort of take care of that. And then in the afternoons, we'll have our gym sessions where I'll program a lot of their session and try and keep it reasonably or as close to in line as to what the head strength coach, Johnny Layden, has programmed for the main group. And then, Liam and I will adjust a few things if they need it, make a few tweaks here and there, and then basically coach them through their sessions as best I can. Sometimes you might have 5, 6, 7 athletes, all working in the same group. So it's, just about getting around to each of them and making sure they're okay and, performing their lifts properly. And Liam will come in, pop his head in at different stages to, if we've got any testing that we need to do, as well. So, they're the main parts of our day-to-day programming and a bit of an insight of how it sort of works at the start when we know that we're going to get a player on our books.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, thanks, mate. That's a great insight. Like I said, for those that I guess haven't seen it in action, paint a bit of a picture for what we're about to dive into. You would have seen, no doubt, a lot of technology in sports science develop and adapt over the 20-year plus you've been in the AFL. What have been the most impressive pieces of tech that you feel help accelerate athletes sort of return to play and help sort of maximize their performance, or help your role, I guess, in returning them and give you confidence that they're ready?
When I first started at Melbourne, working under Alex, and then once I'd taken over from him, a lot of the strength programming was done by the same person. So James McGeoch was our head of strength at Melbourne at the time, and that wasn't part of my job description. So I was always down there assisting and still being part of that part of the program, but he would program everything and liaise with me as to where the players are up to. But since I'd come to North Melbourne, I was given that responsibility to be in charge of the strength programming of the athletes that are under my watch. Which has been a great learning curve, and have learnt heaps over the past 3 seasons. As I said before, Johnny Layden's our head of strength, and he's got a wealth of experience. Worked at Geelong for a long time, and he's been great to lean on in that space. So a lot of it, in terms of programming was new to me for elite athletes. I'd done a fair bit with amateurs and semi-professionals, but working with the AFL group, specifically programming for them, has been really good for my development. And probably the best things that we use, in terms of technology, and everyone uses them, is you can't beat the force decks and the force frame, Nordboard, things like that. with our programming and where we want to get the players to at end stage. We have a lot of criteria that we'll go through and things that we have to tick off along the way to make sure that that they're safe and we're safe to keep progressing them forward. So those types of things are great to use. I like to again not anything that's really new, but I probably don't feel it's used enough is BFR, particularly in the early stages. In the acute phases of an injury, it's a great tool to have where the athlete is still getting a great stimulus on the tissue, regardless of how incapacitated they are. We won't go through all the science of it, but it's easy to use and athletes usually enjoy it, as they're getting a good pump on. BFR's something that I really enjoy using as well. As I said, particularly in the early stages.
And you mentioned head of sports science. How do you sort of incorporate the sports science and managing the athletes' loads, I guess, from acute through to late stage and when they return? At what point do you hand them over back to the main group management?
Yep. Yeah, no, sports science plays an extremely important part in our role and our programming. As I said, for example, in regards to the strength and power testing, using the data we get from things that I just mentioned, the force frame, force decks, NordBoard, helps us, find deficiencies in our athletes and physical makeup, and allows us to program in the gym accordingly. Daily monitoring of players is an extremely powerful tool that helps our team program and set ups individuals' days and weeks, coming off, whether it's pre-season, coming off a huge week of training, or whether it's in season, coming off a game, really gives us great information. And then, as you said, out in the field with things like live GPS, it's extremely beneficial to have that at our disposal. You're able to track their session targets in real time and know exactly where the athlete's up to, and takes a lot of the guesswork out of the equation. Our head of sports science, Brendan Lazarus, I'm chatting with him frequently about what information I need on the athlete, what levels he thinks I can take them to in, coming up in the next session. The more information like that you can have in the rehab space is very, very valuable and something that I rely on daily.
Yeah. And for developing coaches listening in, like you've mentioned, a whole range of different technology that you've got to be across, and obviously managing largely the athletes at later stage, but it sounds like you're also obviously it's integrated with the physiotherapy team for acute stage management as well. So there's that medical sort of understanding the pathology, and then obviously the coaching, like you said, understanding the demands of the game, the conditioning and their recon skills, keeping it specific to the player's position. What have been some of your favourite ways to develop these, I guess, skills and knowledge base outside of obviously doing the role yourself, I guess, to help prepare you for the role?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned before, I had a great mentor in Alex. He taught me the ropes. He was running the program when I was playing there, and unfortunately I was involved in his program once or twice whilst I was playing. But I got a bit of a look into it there. But he really taught me the ropes. Early on, and what's involved, and how I like to structure up my sessions. Is very similar to him. So he was huge, and the the rehab physio we had there at Melbourne at the time, Joel Ames, worked extremely closely with him. He was fantastic. He'd worked with Alex and had some great ideas. So I think it's a lot of the people that you're working with, getting their experience and what they know. Another one I work with, I work with him closely now at North, but spent a bit of time with him before I moved on at Melbourne, was Brenton Eggleston, who I think you've had on the show before. He's awesome at what he does, and we formulated a good team, and we worked on our criteria and different stages that we wanted players to go through, different levels of complexity, with their reconditioning, whether that be in, change of direction, agility, their skill drills, accel, decel, contact drills, those sorts of things. We came up with a good program there, and I guess just over time, it's just developed. With the people that I've worked with. I think there probably hasn't been too many that I've looked at from outside our space, because I think our game's unique to itself. And I want to train the players like footballers. That they're not sprinters or Olympic athletes. They're footballers. So having a background in football really was my advantage coming into this space. There's probably people out there that are probably more book smart than what I am. I've done master's degrees and those sorts of things, but the advantage that I have with my football background is I know what the coaches are looking for. I know I can break down parts of their game plan and implement them into the sport specific part of our program. Whether that be technical drills, work rate drills, match specific drills. I have a whole list of drills that I'll go to throughout someone's rehab, and from that side of things, I have that advantage over others. But I also like to pass that on to others that I've worked with as well. Like to be very collaborative with people and help them out as well.
It's interesting from the football perspective that you touched on there. It'd be great to expand on that in terms of the drill database. It sounds like you've created, so it's not just preparing them to how they play, but so for like a young developing player, if you've got some skill acquisition type drills where you're trying to almost got your coach's hat on and improving them from a footballer as well, and giving them feedback on, I don't know, talk us through running patterns and the skill aspect of the game. How does that differ, I guess, dealing with a younger player, developing player, compared to maybe a more senior player that obviously has a pretty strong experience in their game and what they need?
I think probably more so than any time that I've been in the role. Our coaches are great with information, and Michael Barlow, he's head of our development program. Each player has specific obviously roles in the team, and they have strengths and weaknesses in their game, and regardless of whether they're an experienced player or a developing player, I like to work on their games. I think sometimes when you're in rehab, you think you're just going to be running straight line all the time, and it's going to be boring and monotonous. But that's where I like to condition the players as footballers, as I said before, and try and give them that variety, so that when they join back in to training, it looks like they haven't missed anything, and their skills are spot on. As I said before, there's different stages that when when someone, first gets injured, you can't be doing, end stage football drills, but there'll be a progression that I'll work through different categories. As I said before, there'll be, some low level sort of technical type of drills. And then once they progress through that more into, an active kick sort of thing, then we'll get into some more work rate type drills. Different running patterns that they'll use. If they're a halfback flanker, getting them running different patterns that they might use during the game, and then sort of match specific drills as well. Once we can start contact and those sorts of things, that's when we really start to ramp it up and really get them ready and prepared to play and for what the demands of the game will ask of them. I want them to hit the ground running and be ready to go for the coaches straight away. So I'll use the coaches a lot, or Mick Barlow in particular, and just seeing where do we see them coming back into the team, what position, what are the things that we need to work on, just a couple of little things. That, as I said at the start, there might be some things that are reasonably generic, just to get the body moving again and the legs kicked in again. But once we get towards that end stage, really starting to hone in on what position they play and their specific roles.
And when managing either challenging players that are really pushing to come back in a faster time frame that perhaps you've presented to them, or there's some external pressure from the coaches, let's say if it's a big game to make finals or a final, how do you sort of balance the pressure and obviously then also the duty of care and ensuring that you're doing the athlete, I guess, the best service for their long-term health and performance?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's a very fine balance. You have to be willing to push the limits with your players when they're reconditioning. I don't think you can afford to be conservative and bring them back unfit and underdone because just because you wanted to avoid re-injury. Just because their performance will suffer and the player will be no good to the team anyway. So they may as well still be out. So that's why, we use progression criteria. That's why we do strength and power testing to give us that confidence and belief in our program, and that what we are given the athletes, we back each other in with our experience, and we're lucky we have that full trust from our coach and head of football. They back us in to do our jobs, and that gives us a lot of confidence to get after what we need to, and there'll be no repercussions sort of thing. Just because we're trying to get them back as fit as they ever have. That's all. I think that's always got to be your mentality to get them back in great shape, ready to hit the ground running like they haven't left. So as I said, it's a fine balance. And the player will tell you. Or hopefully they tell you, and the physios, they're very good at picking up on small things, and that's why I said daily monitoring is extremely important as well. So you know how they're tracking day to day. So you might need to pull it back for a session, but once they clear any sort of symptoms or signs, then you can keep progressing forward and keep pushing those athletes hard.
Yeah, 100%. Well said, mate. I couldn't agree more. It's a brutal game, so you've got to have preparing for the brutality. Otherwise, like you said, you're putting them at higher risk than a conservative model. What about the psyche side? Like you mentioned, everyone's got athletes tend to have a different level of competitiveness and drive. And I've certainly also seen as athletes will, I guess, deal with being injured at a different rate. Some are ready to get to work and focus on the program from day one, and others it might take them almost a week to, or a few days to really come on board. What are some of your strategies to, I guess, whether it be educate or motivate the athlete to, that maybe, going into it from the past, that they have that tendency to dip into a bit of a lull, and it can take them a bit of time to help them cope with the fact they're injured and move forward with their program?
Yeah, well, as you said, they're all different beasts, and they're all wired in different ways. So some of them will eat it up and want you to give them more, and some of them it's a grind most days and find it very challenging to stay motivated. I think one of the advantages that I have as a past player is, I have complete empathy for what the injured player is going through. And I feel in return that, I get a lot of respect and trust from the players, as I too have sort of gone through what they've gone through. So, you completely understand that seeing them or them seeing me is the last thing that they want to be doing. They want to be out on the training track, or they want to be in the playing arena doing what they love to do best. But unfortunately, injury is part of competitive sport. So when we get an injured player, there are going to be parts of the program that are non-negotiables, but things that we must tick off and must get done. But also, to answer your question, where possible, I think adding in as much variety as possible for the athlete helps keep them engaged and as enthusiastic as possible, and then you're able to keep the quality there. So, for example, taking them to sessions off site, using different venues, seeing specialists in a certain field, doing testing off site, training with other sports has been a good one that I've used in the past. Constantly changing up their conditioning sessions, trying to keep them aligned and engaged with the main group as much as possible, I think is a big one as well. I think, once you come into rehab, I think you start to feel a bit shunned from everyone else. You're sort of off to the side in your conditioning sessions, and sort of the coaches sort of don't give you a great deal at times. So when the opportunity arises, get them involved in skills sessions, or stationary skills sessions as much as possible. Early stage, basic cone to cone kicking type drills. I think that's really, really important. And I think another one is, particularly with the longer term rehabs, is just allowing time away with family, and whether it's a short holiday or just heading back home, for a few days, can always give a nice boost for them. And it's always giving a little to take a little, and having that understanding of what the player is going through. And I think it's important to as quickly as you can build a good relationship. If you haven't had much to do with that player, which is always a good thing, they haven't spent much time with you, I think it's important to get on the right page with them and earn that respect from them straight away, and they'll do what you're asking of them, and then you'll get back as much as they can on a daily basis. So some of those things I just mentioned are just some of the things that I've used in the past.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Crossy. It's a thorough answer there, mate, and there's some gems all the way through for those looking to be a reconditioning coach or currently are a reconditioning coach to apply to their next season. Is there anything, before we start to wrap it up, anything we haven't discussed that you'd like to share before we move on, mate?
I don't know. It's completely up to you, mate. Maybe we could walk you through the typical stages of reconditioning, the player, we have our overviews or our frameworks that we use. So yeah, maybe you could run you through that. Yeah, if you'd be interested in hearing how we do things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so maybe for a longer term, either shoulder or sort of knee injury, yeah, talk us through the sort of key blocks that you like to take the athlete through,
Yep.
and yeah, what the overview looks like for that athlete.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, we usually start with the recovery stage, where a lot of information's gathered, what's happened, exactly what we're dealing with. As I said, the physios and docs will gather a lot of information in that time, and those early stages. The physio, our rehab physio will be dealing with them a lot. And essentially we're trying to get them back to baseline with their symptoms and clinical signs as quickly as possible. And then once they're through those earlier stages, the next stage we'll move to as safely as possible is the reloading stage. So as I said before, this is where I usually start to come into the picture a bit more. And during this stage, we're aiming to get them back to basic functional movements and starting to load the tissue again in the gym and hopefully out on the field. And as we know, deconditioning can happen very quickly with our finely tuned athletes. So getting them back to simple tasks early in a controlled environment is extremely important for our ability to progress them forward down the track. And I think it's always important to remember in the reconditioning space, it's not what they can't do, but what can they do. You'll obviously have quite a few restrictions when someone gets injured, but there's many different options that the athlete can get done and that you can go to. So I think that's an important thing to remember. Once a lot of our strength criteria numbers are tracking in the right direction and the athlete's recovering well from the previous stimulus, we've given them from, the days before, then we'll start to transfer our mindset from the reloading stage to the reconditioning stage. And once they've graduated this stage, the medical team, essentially hand, the full reins over to me, and I go to work with the athlete and aim to condition them back to full function and peak performance as best I can. Out in the field, as I mentioned before, this stage, involves, working through different levels of change of direction and agility, accels and decels and their different magnitudes with that, progress them with their velocity markers, conditioning, as I mentioned, the sport specific and contact drills, and trying to keep it as specialized as possible to their playing position. And we'll use a lot of different cross-training modalities to top up their conditioning during this stage. In the gym, we're trying to get them back into the main group strength program as closely as possible, trying to replicate, what they might be doing, but also still probably working on some deficiencies that they may have from their recent injury. And once we've worked our way through our criteria progressions in the reconditioning stage, and partway through the back end of the reconditioning stage, as I mentioned before, hopefully the athlete's begun to join back into some modified team training. But now the athlete is ready to full train in the return to train stage. So that's the next stage. And depending on the length of the other stages, we'll probably determine how long this stage will go for. But amongst training with the team during the week. A key element of this stage before the athlete returns to play is to make sure that they've successfully ticked off what is required of them in a game from a metrics point of view. So making sure that they've completed 1, 2, 3 worst case scenario sessions, where the demands of the game are simulated in training, usually planned for the end of the week like a game would be. And if they're successfully able to complete those sessions, then a return to play is on the cards and into the next stage. So again, depending on how long the athlete's been out for, will determine whether there needs to be any modifications or restrictions to the athlete's game time in their return to the playing arena. But regardless of that, hopefully the athlete has returned in great shape, full of confidence in their body. They perform well in their role and they pull up well in the days post-match and able to continue on doing what they love in the weeks and months to come, and we don't see them again. So yeah, that's essentially how we'll plan out our different stages. Liam and I will sit down with the player at the start and walk them through it, and there's progression criteria for each of them, and we'll have them alongside their loading metrics and their calendar, their day-to-day calendar, and make sure we're ticking all the boxes and get them back into playing.
Yeah, fantastic. There's a fair bit that goes into it, as no doubt the listeners are now well aware of, with those stages like you mentioned. So Liam and yourself come up with, I guess, that progression criteria together, both from the recovery phase where Liam's more hands-on with the athlete, and later stage. Is that collaborative with both of you, or does Liam sort of come up with the markers to then hand him over to progress him to the reconditioning phase, and then you create the markers to returning him to play?
Yeah, no, it is definitely collaborative. He will work with those guys in the early stages, ticking off those markers. But we'll talk constantly about what we think we need to see from them to progress to the next stage that we're looking at. So yeah, we have a really good working relationship, and we certainly don't work in silos. Our medical team and our strength and conditioning team, we like to work as a team together and get the best result for our athletes and our coaches.
I'll moving into the last 3 questions, mate. Really appreciate your time and sharing that insight for us from a reconditioning point of view in an AFL environment. In your work life, what are your sort of pet peeves? What fires you up, whether it be an industry thing or something the athletes do, like not put their weights away? What sort of puts fire in the belly?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, just the one that not putting stuff back where it's supposed to be. Probably my pet peeve. It'd definitely be lazy athletes, and athletes that are conditional and pick and choose whether they train hard, today or not. You'll never get a better job than being a professional athlete, in my opinion. And as I mentioned earlier, some athletes are wired differently, and some fell into professional sport, because they got lucky with what God gave them at birth. But my belief is that if you're going to sign a big contract and take a big pay packet and all the big all the bells and whistles that come along with it, you better show up every day and get after it. And if you don't want to, then that's completely fine. It's not easy and it's not for everyone, but there's some people that would give absolutely anything to be in their privileged position. So it's just it's frustrating. When when you get those types of characters, that just don't want to push themselves, and it's a win-loss industry, obviously professional sport, and if you're consistently losing, changes are always happening. So there's a lot of people that are relying on certain individuals in the club, and if someone's not pulling their weight the way that they should be, then that really pees me off. That's probably my number one.
Yeah, you mentioned early days. Bill Davern was a strong influence in this space with standards and holding people to account. Talk us through some sort of actionables that you learnt from Bill, and also in your experience since then that are the most effective when perhaps you do see a lazy action or a behaviour that I think isn't congruent with what that athlete necessarily should do. What's your approach?
Yeah, it's funny. I often think of Bill in those situations, and I think the thing that I always remember with him, training under him was brutal, but he would be up front and let you know exactly what you're in for, and he would always say, "I make no apologies to you guys that this is going to be." Extremely hard. He'd use a different type of language, but he'd almost be telling us that prepare to be absolutely flogged and feel crook during it. So I think just trying to be upfront with the athletes, let them know what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think if you can explain to the athlete, what benefits they're going to get out of it, that they'll get it done eventually. As I said, a lot of guys will just eat it up and absolutely love it, but there is always a percentage, a small percentage of guys, who drag the chain along, and they're the ones that you probably, unfortunately, you do have to give a little bit more love to them as well, and just spend a bit more time with them, pushing them along and being by their side, and it's not to just check in on them and making sure that they're doing it, but knowing that you're there to support them through it, knowing that they don't want to be in the position that they are, but the reality is that you are, and we've got to get this done, and we'll get it done together. I think that's important for those type of characters as well.
Yeah, and more often than not, the ones that sort of pull through and start to find something, and I guess experience it over time. Do they start to condition and the mindset shifts? Or do you need to see physical gains first, so then they start to feel a bit more confident?
Yeah, as you know, definitely the physical gains. Everyone loves to see those, but when they're making strides forward and getting closer to a return to train or return to play, the mood starts to pick up a lot. But usually it's in those acute phases where it's a bit of a grind, and if it's a medium to long-term injury, they know they're in for the long haul, and a lot of things can be monotonous at times for them. But as I said, trying to add as much variety as we can during those stages can help them through a bit with that. And then it sort of buys you a bit of time where you're still getting the good quality in for them, and then they're progressing forward, getting closer to that return to train and play, and before you know it, they're out. And a lot of the time, they're the ones that really thank you for the support that you've given them. I think a lot of them know that they're a bit of a pain in the ass, and they take up a lot of your time, but that's our job. That's what we're paid to do, and we enjoy doing it. But it's it's nice when they appreciate, all the hard work that you've put in behind them, and they come out the other end, and yeah, they're back doing what they love.
Absolutely. And what about a favourite way to spend a day off, mate?
Well, yeah, as you know, Jack, there's, in our role, there's not too many days off. You're always planning ahead, trying to stay ahead of the curve. Even in the off season, we're always still pretty busy with guys that have finished the season, with injuries or had postseason surgeries. But yeah, we've got a family holiday coming up soon in Queensland, so spending some quality time with my wife and two kids. My mum and dad and brother and sister and their families are coming along too. So getting out, doing some training with my boy, and heading to the beach with the family. Going to a water park or some fun activity with the family. Going to a nice restaurant for dinner. Just enjoying the simple things in life for me, with your loved ones, is a perfect way to spend my days off, and yeah, I look forward to that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, not a bad time. It's felt like winter the last couple of days as well. So a bit of Queensland
Yeah.
weather would be nice. Well, obviously we're the recording of this of middle of September 2024. What's on the horizon, mate, for the rest of the year that you're excited about?
Well, I think yeah, just in the spare time that we do get, I think, just always continuing to learn. I'll never be a closed book. In it's sort of funny, like a lot of people come out of uni and head straight into this field of work. Whereas, I didn't start in this field until I was essentially 33. So, I'm 41 now. So I'm only sort of 7, 8 years into my career, and just always learning, being willing to always learn. Yeah, so just doing little short courses, here and there, keeping your knowledge up to speed, I think is really important in our industry, and then, you know using that going forward into your programming next year, and you might add a couple of percent here and there in your program. As I said, it's never a finished product, so always looking for ways to improve. Yeah, so looking forward to doing those types of things, and looking into next season. It'd be nice to get a few more wins on the board, and that's obviously never guaranteed. There's a lot of hard work and dedication ahead for our players and our organisation, but excited to hopefully be a part of the rise of the team. And I think that's why we love team sports so much. You ride the bumps with a team of people, and you aim to achieve goals as high as you possibly can. So they're that's what I'm sort of looking forward to. Hopefully in the near future.
You mentioned 7 or 8 years in the industry as largely the reconditioning coach. Is this the strength and power role something that interests you, or the high performance manager role, or do you see yourself as wanting to be a specialist in the reconditioning space?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I think coming out of playing, that's sort of definitely where I wanted to end up, was in a high performance management role. I mentioned a few of those names before. Dave Misson, Bill Daver, and Justin Cordy. Kev White, who I work with now. Unbelievable to work under. They're sort of guys that I aspire to be like, but I still think that's a little while away. I think I've still got a lot to learn, and I think if I don't end up getting to that point, I absolutely love the role that I have at the moment. I love being able to work one on one with players, and I'm still able to get out there and do the running and, do gym and the cross training with the boys. And you really get a personalized feel to their programming. Whereas sometimes I think if you're the high performance manager, you do have that connection with the players, but it's you're with these guys, every sort of waking hour that you're at the club sort of thing, and you really do grow a close bond with them, and that's what I really enjoy, and piecing together the puzzle of what a program will look like for each individual, and the different injuries that come along during the season. So to answer your question, again, I'd love to be a high performance manager, but the reconditioning role, if that's what I was to be for the rest of my days, then I'd be absolutely more than happy to do that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, yeah, thanks again, Crossy, for jumping on and sharing with us your journey in high performance sport, both as a player and as a strength and conditioning coach. I really appreciate you providing great insight into the overview, how collaborative the process is that you work with the medical team and the coaches, and every step of the journey, how objective it is along the way as well. Provide a really sound framework, and clearly the athletes that you work with are lucky to have you in their corner. For those that have any follow-up questions, mate, is there a good place to get in contact?
Well, yeah, I'm not a huge presence on social media. I don't have any Instagram or Facebook or anything like that, but I am on LinkedIn.
Yep.
So yeah, more than happy. Yeah, I'm not super active on it, but I do get on every couple of days and check things out. Check out this podcast of yours often, and there is a lot of good information that you see pop up. So LinkedIn's probably the big one that I use.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, mate. Well, for those listening in that might be driving to work or from work, I'll add Crossy's LinkedIn handle in the show notes. So when you park the car, you can access it there. Thanks for everyone that's tuned in live as well. If you tuned in halfway through, you can find this episode on our YouTube channel. Just head over to the live section before we release on our podcast in the next few weeks. Next live chat is with Anthony Rupi, which will be 10 a.m. 27th of September, Australian Eastern Standard Time. So I look forward to seeing you guys then. Thanks again, Crossy. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Jack. Keep up the good work, mate.
Oh, smash that. Thanks for that, mate. That was fantastic.